here and make sure I've got everybody. Um, okay, I think that everyone should have access. Today we're going to do a kind of like fun play along session. I have added everyone to a sample project, and I'll walk you through how to get into it, but you get to play along and do stuff with everybody because that's the magic of Loop. It's really great at doing collaborative stuff. So I'm gonna share my screen here and we'll walk through it from the beginning.
I haven't managed to make it to any of them yet, including the intro one, just FYI. So, and I tend to also be a bit of a like technology, not good at technology
You
person.
are good.
Um,
Rachel, don't sell yourself short.
oh, well, thank you, Amy. That's very kind. I mostly feel lost in the woods. So if I feel like I'm probably going to be asking some fairly basic questions potentially in this.
That
Just
is totally okay. By
okay.
all means, especially like this is a smaller group, so if y'all have any questions, go ahead and unmute and just pop on right in here. And the good news is that I'm going to try and start kind of from the beginning here, so hopefully everybody will like kind of move in the same direction at the same time, but stop me if you feel a little lost.
And I do have the videos from the intro and Teams and all the other ones. I just haven't had the time to upload them so that you guys have access to them. So, worst case scenario, early next week they'll be accessible to you guys, and I'll let you guys know.
Also, we did add two more sessions of those intro ones. If you're wanting to tune in live, I think those are the first week of December, might be the second. I don't know. Check Amy's email. Okay. So, as with all things Microsoft, we are going to start from the Insider because the Insider is just a great jumping off point to get to anything that you're wanting to do with any of our products. So that's insider.blueridge.edu. And the very first thing that we're going to do is we are going to click on our best friend, the waffle. The waffle's in the upper left-hand corner up here, these nine little dots arranged like a waffle press. So once you click on that, depending on what you've been in, you might already have Loop in this list. If this is one of like the first times that you're accessing this portion, it's probably not going to be there. That's okay. You have two options to get to it. You can either search using this search box right here, or you can click the More Apps button in the lower right-hand corner. Depending on Microsoft's mood, it might be here on this screen. If you don't see it in this upper section right here, click on the All Apps in the lower right hand under that. Once you click on that All Apps, it'll give you a full list of all of the Microsoft tools and products. And as you can see, that's a lengthy one. We do have a recording breaking those down for you. We'll release that pretty soon here. What we're going to work in today is Loop, and I am actually going to do most of my work today with you guys through the browser version of Loop because it doesn't really have its own standalone desktop app. Any of y'all that have been to the previous sessions know that I usually love pointing you to the desktop app because they tend to be more robust. In this particular case, Loop is actually better in the browser than it is in any of those individual little pieces.
But
You may
that's
find
not
it
to
more,
say that they won't have an app at some time because Microsoft loves to change stuff. So,
oh, absolutely.
yeah.
And in your daily workflow, you might find it more beneficial to be working only with the tiny individual components. And we'll talk about what those are, but just know that this, like all of the other Microsoft products, is very customizable and you can work with it in a whole bunch of different ways in whatever works for your workflow. So when you first open Loop, it's going to look a little something like what's on my screen right now. You guys probably won't have as many as I do, but you should have a square that says Demo Workspace. Does everybody have that square? Try refreshing your browser. It might take it a second or two to sync. Also, let me double check to make sure I did share it with you. Yes, I did share it with you, so you should be getting it soon.
And if not, switch to a different browser. Cache is crappy.
You can also, if it's not showing up for you, you can try clicking this workspace right here, and it'll open a flyout navigation. Sometimes the squares take a second or two to pop up. Oh, yes, that's a good point. Someone pointed that out to me yesterday. Sometimes you have to go to the notifications and it'll say like Heather has invited you to a workspace and you might have to click the accept button there. Thank you so much, Kevin. Um, yeah, I forgot that it does that sometimes. All right, so I'm going to assume, unless anybody tells me otherwise, that we've all got to the demo workspace. You guys probably also have this one with little sunglasses. It's like my workspace. That one is default, and by default, you're the only one that has access to it when you first start out. You can share stuff in it, but just as kind of like the default thing that Microsoft gives you so that your box isn't empty. We're going to click on that demo workspace thing. When you first open it, it may look just like this, where you're like, okay, I have a random page that is open. I don't know what's in this. I see that there's like a sample policy, but Heather said she was going to send me some task stuff. I don't know what's happening. So across all Microsoft products, one great thing is that the like home navigation thing is always in the upper left-hand corner. So if you click on whatever this first icon is in your like navigation trail, you can then select the area that you're currently in, and that'll open up your full navigation panel and you'll be able to see all of the contents. So what are we looking at with this navigation panel? Up at the top, you have the name of, it's called a workspace. When you're working with these in real life, these workspaces should be tied to existing channels or teams that you already have in your teams. Today, this demo one's a little bit different. It's not tied to a channel just because it's set up to work with this training. So this is kind of like the name of the like binder of that you if you had a binder. And then everything down in this list are the contents of that binder. These are the individual pages within the binder. So, Loop. Like I mentioned before, it's really great at doing collaborative work. If you're working in a workspace like this through Loop, you guys can just go ahead and create pages and you can start working that way, or you can edit existing pages. Let's start with how you add a new page. To do that, click the plus button on this little line where it says sorted by hierarchy, and feel free to go ahead and do this. It's totally cool. You have three options here. You have a page, and this is the most common one. What that does is it just inserts a blank page for you to start working from. You can insert a link. This is a link to pretty much anything you could possibly want. I'll show you what these bottom two look like here in a bit. You can also upload a random file. So I'm going to just click insert a new page. And as you can see, it inserts one that's called untitled. From here, I can either just start working directly, or I can actually go ahead and load in a template. If you're working with this, the template option is only going to be available to you when your page is blank and empty and first new. Once you've added content, like if I were to go in here and I typed something, you'll see all my template options disappeared. So just know that if you're wanting to start from a template, the thing still has to be blank. You can pick one of these here. I recommend clicking on Template Gallery. What this will do is it opens up the existing template gallery and you can look through all of these options here on the left-hand side and it'll give you a preview here on the right. You can pick whichever one it is that appeals to you and you can just click Use Template. When you do that, everything in there is going to be like automatically loaded in as it was in that template. One second, please. Okay. The kind of downside to that is that it will like rename the page and you might have to rename it. You also might hate the icon that's being used for your page. That's okay. It's all fixable. To get to those sort of options, you're going to hover over the page you want to modify, click the three little dots, and then click Rename and Style. This changes the three core parts of identifying that page. I can change the title here. Well, hold on a second, folks. Mine's being a little bit janky, so I'm gonna refresh my page. There we go. I had this happen the other day. It's something about this template, I think. Well, I'm just going to move on and we're going to do icons here because there's actually another way to like rename stuff as well. If you click on the icon, it'll change this little symbol here to the left and you can just pick whichever one you would like. If you've been looking in our navigation list over here, you'll notice there are some that look like folders. That's how I did that, is I just went in, I typed the word folder, and then I picked the folder that I wanted to represent this. Oh, look, there's a boba. I love bobas. Let's use boba for my icon. You can also update the cover image, and I actually really like the Microsoft stock image stuff available. So you can just type in whatever it is that you're looking for, and then pick the image that speaks to you. Click Update, and it's going to change it here at the top of my page. If your rename thing is being kind of funky like mine was, you can also rename it just from right here. I can't even spell my own name. There we go. Gold star for me. And you'll see that updated over here on the left-hand corner. I don't know who did this, but right now you're my favorite. Um, that's what I love about live stuff. So as you're working in here, you can just start modifying your template if you used a template. The great thing is you can get rid of stuff, you can move stuff. It's all super customizable. You are not in any way tied to whatever was already in there. So when you hover over an item, you're going to see two icons pop up over here on the left. First one is this plus icon, and when you click on that, it's going to add in a new like item thing right below whatever it was you clicked the plus icon on. You're going to notice there are a ton of options that you can insert. You can pick any of checklist is really common, bulleted list, numbered list. I'm going to just use a table here as a sample. I recommend you play with that list just to see what all is in there because as you see, it goes on and on and on and on. Some really cool ones are this task list right here. And if you have a really big page, the headings are really useful, especially if you use it in conjunction with table contents. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. So because tables are really common, I went ahead and inserted one. I just want to do a sample here. So if anyone that's seen my sample materials knows that I use the sample turtles. So we're going to just set up a table for that here. I'm going to put the table number, or the turtle name and the number of strawberries eaten. To do that, all I did was click here and I just retyped whatever I wanted my column headed or be. You know what? As I'm thinking about this, I am realizing that what I want is I want the sample turtles to report to me every week how many strawberries they've eaten. I can't be bothered to make this table over and over and over. So I think what I want to do is set up a template. I've already got this that I've been working on some, and maybe I want some of this and maybe I don't. If there's parts of this that I'm like, actually, I don't want that for my template, I can click on this other icon here, and that'll give me a few different options. For the template building part, I'm just going to pick delete for this, but you also have options to copy existing pieces, or you can move it up and down. You can also move it up and down by clicking and dragging the six little dots there, and you'll see like a line pops up for wherever it's going to move to. I'm going to delete some of this stuff just to where we can get the table with the sample turtles up toward the top because that's the part that I really care about. We're going to pretend that the rest of this is, whoops, not that one. We're going to pretend that the rest of this is important to me, even though, like, sure, that's what I need. So we know that I have three sample turtles, not two. I'm going to click this new button here down at the bottom of the table to add another row. You can also do stuff like that by right clicking, and there's a whole bunch of those options that you should be familiar with if you've used any sort of spreadsheet software. I'm going to enter my sample turtle names here because as adorable as they are not especially intelligent. And so they need to be able to just look at their name and then type the numbers here every week. I've decided this other stuff is bothering me. Thank you for your patience. Another thing that this table has the ability to do is to change the data types to narrow it down so people can't just enter random garbage. I know that Rocket might like to walk across the keyboard, and if that's the case, I don't want him entering random A, B, C, D, whatever, as he's trying to get to the number keys. Or like in an actual business thing, it might be you need these to be numbers to where you can perform math calculations on them and you don't want someone typing out the word for. To do that, you're going to click this little drop down arrow right here and then go to change column type. And I can switch this one to a number. There's some other stuff in here that you are welcome to play with. You can do a date, you can do person, voting, so on and so forth. Some people really like the labels as well. As with everything else, there are a bunch of pre-built options you guys are welcome to play with and try to use. Excuse me. And now that I've changed it to number, you'll see that like it won't let me enter random letters. However, it will let me enter a random number. And since these are numbers, it'll go ahead and give me some options. For example, maybe I want to know how many strawberries were eaten in total. So you'll see this thing automatically popped up down here at the bottom, and I can change it between sum, average, and count. It's pretty familiar if you've done a lot of work in Excel. Um, it's just a handy tool to know that you have in your toolbox. So this is what I want, and I want it saved as a template so that my turtles can report this to me every week. That being the case, I want to make sure that the information that they're having to enter every week is blank because otherwise that'll be saved to my template and every week I would have to delete it out and we don't want that. Now that I've got what I want here, what we're going to do is we are going to click on the three little dots here and I'm going to click save page as template. And then I'm just going to do, like, if I'm happy with this, like if I need to change the title or anything, I can do that. But if I'm happy, I can just click the Save as Template here, and you'll see it's going to work on it here for a couple seconds, and it's now been saved as a template. I recommend as a best practice to go ahead and like save this page into as a sub page, and I'll show you how to do that here in just one second. I recommend this just because if you need to make changes to the template or later, it is easier to do so if you still already have one, or if someone else saves over it by accident or deletes it. It's always nice to just have a backup. So if I'm wanting to do that, let me make sure none of y'all, okay. I can create a folder sort of thing like this. All this is another page. Like I mentioned, when you add one, you can change the icon, and that's all I did. This is a page that says custom templates. And then anything in this folder are actually just subpages of the existing template. You can do that one of two ways. If you haven't one already existing, just as a like free floating page, you can add it to an existing page right here by just clicking and dragging. And you'll see that the little highlighter thing changes. Like if it's a line, it's going to move there. But if it's surrounding the entire item, it'll change it as to be a sub page of that. So I'm going to make sure that it says custom templates is, and it's got the little line all the way around it. And then I'm just going to drop it in there and you'll see it appeared as a subpage of that. Another way to create a subpage is to hover and click on the three little dots and click New Subpage. I'm going to delete that one because I don't need it, but just know that you can get to pretty much anything in multiple ways. So in the same way that this thing can get collapsed and you might come in and there might be nothing, sometimes Microsoft likes to collapse different stuff over here. So if you see this little arrow, the caret pointing inwards, that lets you know that this has subpages. And that is the real benefit to subpages. Just it makes it easier to collapse and navigate through all of your stuff if you have a whole bunch of stuff in your loop workspace. I'm so sorry. I've got a few things for you guys to look at here, if you would like to. First off, I have this sample project here. All that these are some of the templates that exist in the template gallery. They are probably the more popular ones that I've seen used. There's this one here, which has the project brief. The project brief uses that task list thing that I mentioned from the plus icon right here, this task thing. The reason that the task list is particularly cool is that you can actually assign different tasks to people. If it is done in the task list, that information will automatically feed over to their planner and their to-do list in the Microsoft ecosystem. And we have separate breakouts on those, but just know that it actually integrates into stuff. You also have the ability to tag people in this as you do all other Microsoft stuff. If you're doing it through this loop, through the full loop browser version, they will get notifications to their teams or to their loop. There is an existing bug right now where in certain contexts in Teams, if you tag them within Teams, sometimes they don't get their notifications right. So just know that if you're like, no, I tagged you, and they're saying, I don't have a notification. No, that's legit. The Microsoft is working on it. Let's see. So we created that template down here, right? I want to show you guys how to use it. We're going to do the same thing that we did before. And please, it's super important. It has to be done in this way. You can create a new page, or if you're in some of the other Microsoft products, it might say add a new component. Either way, that's what you want to do. You have to add a new one. And once you do that, you can click on the template gallery and since we saved this as a template, I can see that it's showing up in my list here, and I can just click that Use Template. It is crucial that you do not copy and paste a loop. The reason that you can't copy and paste a loop is because of the way that loop is built. Since it's built for collaboration, it is built to be used in multiple locations. So let's say that I have the sample policy right here. I'm working on this and I'm working on this with you guys, and you can add stuff into the sample policy or whatever. But I'm really looking at this and I'm like, the Turtle Manifesto. I really need some input into this from some people that are not part of this exact workspace. So to do that, I can click on my juicy little dots here I'm going to click Create Loop Component. That'll change it from being a paragraph right here to actually being its own little container that I can share in other locations. I'm going to let it think and turn all sorts of colors. You do not have to, but you may find a benefit in clicking where it says component one and then renaming it just because if you're looking through some of your stuff, you might see it say like component one, component two, component three, and you're not going to know which one it is. So if you find it beneficial to your workflow, know that you can change this by clicking on it. Now that I can see that this is its own component, I'm going to click this copy component button right here. And did I share this page with you guys? I did not. That's okay. I'm going to open up Teams to where you guys can see it on this one. Hopefully nobody's doing anything weird today, so I'm sorry if there's anything funky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down to to my testing channel. I lied to you guys. My my online Teams is being a little bit funky today. I need to reboot my computer. Uh, Sorry about that. So if you'll hold on and bear with me, I will actually just swap this over to where you guys can see my desktop version. All right, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my demo channel here, and I've still got that component on my keyboard. I'll type my message to the people that I need some help from, and then I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to paste that. And you'll see that Teams is going to work on doing a little bit of magic, and it's actually going to insert that as a loop component. You'll see this pop up right here that says some people in this channel don't have access to this loop component. The good news is that you can do that from right there by clicking on Give Access. And so anyone that sees this post will be able to have access to it. If you would prefer, you can also click where it says this people with existing access can use this link, and you can change the permission settings here using that same sort of share interface that you're going to see all across Microsoft. In this particular case, I can share it to where anyone in blue in our entire tenant can use it. What that means is if you have an @Blue Ridge email address and you have this link, you'll be able to access it. I can do people in this channel, or I can specify only specific people. I can also adjust their access level between can view, which is read only, and can edit. In this case, I want their help, so I'm going to leave it with can edit. I'm going to post this here. And anyone that's in this channel can now make modifications to this particular loop. Um, and the really cool thing is that that's going to stay up to date no matter which sort of interface I'm looking at it. It'll be up to date whether I'm looking at it in the Teams interface or if I'm working with it in the loop interface. And I would like to demonstrate for you guys, like I keep telling people, I'm like, it is like the most, that was my bad. It'll come back in a minute. Um, there we go. I keep telling people it is super live. Like it is one of the best sync products that Microsoft has. Because I don't know if you guys have worked in certain products. However, you'll encounter a situation, sometimes in like Google stuff too, where it'll tell you, hey, this is out of sync with somebody else, or somebody else has this open, so you can't edit it. That's what Loop was built to solve. It's to where anyone can edit it all of the time, and it is so live, it'll show you like letter by letter. For example, if I could get someone to just go ahead and like pop into this page somewhere and, I don't know, add a turtle contingency or something, you'll see these icons here. I don't know why I pointed with my finger. You'll see these icons show me like where there's someone starting to type. And then as she starts to add, it will literally add it in just as quickly as she types it. And there you have it. Like that is the beauty of Loop. Let's see, what other options do I have for you guys here? In this reference materials section, this is the other kind of stuff that I showed you that you could add from this plus button. There's link and there's upload a file. This first one here is just a link. For example, when you click on it, it is going to take you to the Learn M365 page on our Insider because that's the one that I picked. And then there's this reference material right here, which is just a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet that I uploaded because it was the first thing that popped up in my list. I've had it asked, like, where does this stuff live? And the answer to that is OneDrive. You will see in your either your personal OneDrive or in your site's like SharePoint OneDrive listing, there'll be a folder that's added that's called Loop. If you're like, I definitely don't remember creating a Loop folder, like someone's like hacked all my things, help, like don't worry. Microsoft does that on its own for any files that it needs to save in your workspace that it can't store in just Loop. So just let it be. Don't delete it unless you actually don't want that material to exist anywhere. Um, but it is saved usually to your team site's like folder structure. So let's talk about like some real life use cases here. For example, the IT department actually does use a Loop workspace. We do this for reporting some of our weekly tasks, and we do that using a template the way that I showed you guys how to build it. And just like as a peek here, this is what our workspace looks like. This is our templates folder here, and you can see that it's got exactly what I showed you guys to build. And then this is the thing that we build and have to submit every week. It's our report, and we have them broken out by month. And then every page is just named the week of that, the date of that week. To add a workspace, what you would do is you would go to an existing channel, and then you would click the plus button at the top of the screen here. Once you're in your channel, this plus button here, and then click on Apps, and then you'll click on Loop. This will let you create a workspace tied to that particular channel. So in this case, since I'm in the demo channel, when I'm in my Loop section on the left-hand side where it lists all my workspaces, I would have one that's called Demo Channel after this is added. Once you have that in there, you can work with it either through the Teams interface like this, or you can work through the online version the way that we have been this morning. Do I have any questions about what I've covered so far, or maybe any like particular use cases you would like to talk about as examples?
Um, can we share this and do things that include students? Like, for
Um,
instance, I'm the head of the horticulture department, or not horticulture club. I'm the faculty advisor for horticulture club. And there's been a lot of back and forthing on like, how do we actually share events? How do we coordinate X, Y, and Z projects? And we tried Slack and everybody hates it and nobody ever checks it. And it's like, can I you because this just seems a little more functional in terms of the actual things we want to use and add. And so am I allowed to do things that include students?
you are allowed to. They most likely would need to exist on your external site, not your internal one, because only external stuff stored on your external site can actually be shared with students. My tiny little asterisk is I haven't had the opportunity to test that. It should work. But if it doesn't, go ahead and reach out to us and we'll help you play around and see and make sure that it's not like something we have misconfigured.
Which I would probably need help with because Heather, you keep saying that word like we're doing it online, but you also can do it offline. When you say that, my brain goes "Beep." Like, what does that mean? Um,
So
so yeah, maybe that can be more one-on-one, but I don't entirely understand what you mean when you say that.
that is a question I actually get from a lot of people. So I'm going to go ahead and like cover it just like on a high level, just in case anybody else here is like, actually, I was wondering the same thing. The what it is all of the mic not all of, but many of the Microsoft products have different ways for you to interact with them. Every Microsoft product can be interacted with through the waffle and the more apps list, and this will allow you to interact with it through your web browser, the same one that you would use if you were trying to Google something or go to My Courses or whatever. Every Microsoft service can be interacted with in this way. Some of the ones on this list can be installed on your computer as a just a standalone app, the same way, for example, Microsoft Word is one of them. I can click on it here in in this list of apps, and it'll open it up in my browser, and it's that web interface, and you can continue working with it. However, you're probably familiar with just going down to your start button at the bottom of your screen and then opening up Word from your list of applications installed on your machine. That is the desktop app. If it has a desktop app, usually that desktop app has more features than just the online browser version. On
And
top of it, go ahead.
the desktop app, and I think why Heather's saying offline, because you do, if you're using Word, you have the ability to, although it is highly not recommended, you have the ability to save that document to your C drive. But if you're opening something, it's automatically synced. If you're opening something from the cloud, it's automatically synced to the cloud, even though you're working on it on your desktop.
That is highly recommended.
Not, do not save anything on your C drive.
And like complete clarity, if I said offline, I probably misspoke. I probably was trying to reference the difference between the browser version and the desktop version. So,
And uh,
my bad.
let me just say, Rachel, there's going to be so many opportunities for you to work with your students. And students have access, they do have a license to the Microsoft stuff. Current students do. And when we first started talking about this, looking at all the sites that were created, I mean, I've jokingly said before, I literally have a site named the number one because somebody was testing something or just random letters. But Sharon Cease would create teams to work with uh, her people, employees, and then she would make it on her classes. That is great that you're thinking about that. But since we've restricted the site creation ability, you'd have to request a site for your students. And then that would bring everything that Heather's talking about together in that course site. Does that make any sense? Yeah. And I mean,
We also have a focus session on specifically using Microsoft stuff to teach a little bit later in December,
Oh yeah, I remember seeing that one. I mean,
just because I'll
and one of
always
my
plug
big
my stuff.
takeaways is again that I'm probably for certain things just going to need to meet with y'all. Like once I have the broad strokes, it's like, okay, here's this really detailed thing I'd really like to figure out and how to do it safely. Because yeah, I don't want some student to accidentally get access to like every single thing I have
Yes.
saved or documents, but like plant sales, same thing. You know, we do big plant sales and we have a lot of data that we gather associated with those that I do want students to have access to because they have to do P&L statements from year to year and all of this sort of thing. And so, yeah, that just seems like a really great way that I would end up using this potentially.
Which is awesome. And there are lots of options in terms of support as you're moving forwards. I I know that I may be like beating a dead horse on this one, but I keep pointing people to this Learn M365 link at the top of Insider. If literally you do not remember anything I've said in any of my sessions, remember that there's this link here that says Learn M365 at the top. What this will do is it can get you to the help desk articles that are maintained by the IT department here, but it also links to the Microsoft Learn materials. And those go all the way from help, I can't find this in my list to open it, all the way from that to like expert IT level. Anything that you want to know is in that like Microsoft Learn environment. Or you could even just go to Google because since Microsoft is an industry standard product, if you have that question, chances are someone else has had that question too.
and plus you could chat GPT or Copilot and just say, I'm an instructor and this is what I want to do, and it'll tell you.
There was one thing from this conversation that I wanted to go ahead and highlight, which is how to share your loops. In the Loop browser experience, it shows up as this purple button up here, which I'm going to click on, and you have three different options to manage your sharing. You can share your entire workspace. If you do that, everyone will have access to everything within it and can create and all sorts of things just as needed. And as they are created, they'll have access to them. Your second option is to share a page link, which is a link to just the page that you're currently on. In this case, it would be a link to my sample policy. And the third one is to convert this to a loop component that you can paste like we did with this one little section, except if you click it on this upper part here, it'll grab the whole page into a loop component. The share options in there are just the same as we looked at before. You can select who you want it to go to, larger groups, and modify what type of access that they have. The reason that I pointed out that way is if you have a situation where you're like, okay, I need to create this, but I want to work on it a little bit before it's shared, you can do that by only sharing via page links. Do we have any other questions? Well, if that's the case, then this is pretty much all of Loop. If anything comes up, know that you can always reach out to us at helpdesk@blueridge.edu. I know we say it all the time, but the thing is, actually, you will get the fastest response by emailing there, rather than like calling someone or emailing someone individually. So we're here for you and like enjoy using Loop. Thanks for coming, guys. Oh, if you tuned in late, make sure to leave your name in the chat so that I can capture that for the attendance today. Thank you. Amy, if you would end the recording, I would
Yeah, I was
appreciate it.
just writing.